All right, this is Sports for Real, Coach Hall. I off to a late start tonight, but still got plenty to talk about. I'm going to try to make this short because things are getting back to normal around here in Florida, and got to get back to work tomorrow. So, start off talking about a little college football action yesterday. But beforehand, you just saw the Ravens just dust off the Bills. What you're seeing from the Ravens is not nothing that I'm expecting. I'm christening them a couple of weeks ago as the regular season Ravens, and they're going to look good during the regular season. And people are going to say, "Ooh, look at the Ravens, what they're doing." But an inquisitive defensive coordinator, like I would be, I'm watching the Ravens, and I'm thinking, if I see the Ravens in the playoffs, what am I going to do with that? So I start piecing things together, and I start looking at it, and I watch and see how other teams are playing against them, and I look at it. Then, if I got them on my schedule, I'm going to try some of these ideas, and I'm also going to pull back from past defenses of the Ravens, more specifically what Kansas City did to them in the AFC Championship game. You got the same concept, but now with Derrick Henry, people think the plan changes, but not really. So if you're playing against these guys head up and you see what they're doing, you can start putting together a plan. And like I told you before, there's a formula to beating the Ravens. But I'm not making millions of dollars like these NFL coaches are. I'm sitting here watching it. I've seen the blueprint unfold. Now it's just a matter of seeing somebody take it to that next level. And what you're going to see is what you're seeing now is that they're going to be hot during the regular season. And everybody's going to give them all this praise. Then they're going to get to the playoffs and they're going to run across that defensive coordinator who's been plotting and planning to see them all year long. So let them get their praise now. And despite all the praise that they're getting right now, keep in mind, this is still just a 500 football team. Now, having said that, college football yesterday was very exciting. And I want to start off real quick by talking about Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. And they've been hearing it from all these people about how they can't put together a team and they just all for clicks and all this different kind of things. And the way they played, they hadn't put together a good game really since they been together. Now this is their second season. He's got all these high profile coaches and players on the sideline and he got it all going the same way he had it at Jackson State. But in reality, the only team that they really beaten Division One lately was Colorado State. But that changed last week when they came back in overtime and knocked off Baylor. That was after the Hail Mary pass put them in their position. That was Baylor's fault. It never should have happened. But still, give Colorado credit for being in that position. They won that game in overtime, and they went down to Orlando to play against the number one rushing team in the nation, where they were two touchdown underdogs. But surprise, surprise, Dion put together a complete game. They ran the football, they threw the football, and they stuffed UCF and that vaunted running attack that they have. Now, KJ Jefferson, he peed down his leg. He did not look good at all. I've seen him look a whole lot better when he was at Arkansas, but just the way he was inconsistent there, he is inconsistent with UCF. So it kind of reminds me of what you saw tonight with Jackson. If they're running the football, he's fine. He can hit those wide open receivers in the flat. Everything's clicking and get the 5, 10 yard runs. Everything's great. But if he can't get that running game going and you are dependent on to throw the football, he can't do it. KJ Jefferson couldn't do it. And I want to show you some striking similarities as I move on with this little conversation. But I just want to say congratulations to Colorado. They finally put together a football game. And if they can continue playing that way, then they may have something to say about what happens in the Big 12. Now, Kansas State so far has been playing, to me, the best football in the Big 12. Now, they got them in 2 weeks. They got a week off. They got a whole 2 weeks to get ready for them. So if they can put together a game against Kansas State and knock them off, then I can say that I'm sounding some alarms for Colorado. But until then, let's see what happens with Colorado and Kansas State. Now, the epic game last night was Georgia and Alabama. Georgia always seemed to fall short against Alabama. And the one time they did beat them, they ended up with the national championship. But even then, that was kind of suspect. But on the line of the quarterbacks, you have Carson Beck going head up against Jalen Milroe. Milroe, he kind of reminds me like the rest of the running quarterbacks. He's fine long as he's running the football and the team is running between the tackles. They're great, but you can't really depend on him to throw the ball. Well, he came out yesterday and he hit about his first 10, 11 passes. Alabama jumped all over Georgia right out of the gate, and it looked like they was going to run them off, getting up as high as 30-7. But on the flip side of that, you have this guy right here, Carson Beck. He's usually a steady football player, but he was under heavy pressure all night. And in the first half, he just fell apart. He threw a couple of interceptions. He threw some passes behind some people. He threw a couple other passes that should have been intercepted. This should have been a 50-0 halftime lead for Alabama the way the game was going. But Georgia, after hearing, we all heard what Saban had to say, that both of these teams are capable of coming back. So I just sat there and watched the game just to see what was going to happen. And lo and behold, Georgia got into kind of a hurry-up mode, and that original game plan kind of went out the window, and they started playing a little football. They started hitting those wide-open receivers. They started picking up those blocks. Now, Beck was still under some pressure, and he still made some bad throws, but he brought the team back and even got the lead with about 2 minutes to play. Now, Miro, on the other hand, after dominating so far early in the game, and when Georgia started to catch up and get into a groove, he started to fall apart. But once Georgia took the lead, the next play, he threw a deep pass, and it was an off pass, but that little young freshman made a great catch. He came inside to get it and made a couple guys miss and outran him to the end zone and took the lead, which turns out to be the final points. But in the end, Beck drove him down. It looked like he was going to tie the game up. But he threw it to the end zone and got picked off. He was a little late, and the guy they'd been beaten all night, sometime he would look up and he would never know where the ball was. But this time he located the ball and was able to jump the route and seal the game for Alabama. Great game. But all the pressure has been on Beck because they're saying that this guy is not what they thought he was, and he's not going to be the highest draft rated because this game here showed a lot of flaws. Well, for what I can see, he spent a whole lot of time on his back and running to stop from being on his back. And for the most part, when he had to play, and he did. But a lot of people are now saying that the top two quarterbacks going off the board is going to be Shedeur Sanders and it's going to be Carson Beck. And some people say they don't even consider Beck as the quarterback that is going to be a top draft choice over Shedeur Sanders. They're saying Sanders is the guy all alone. But if you look at the comparison yesterday for Milroe and Beck ended up with 439 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and those 3 critical interceptions. Also, he had 1 critical fumble. Milroe started out red hot. He only missed 6 passes all night. He hit those 2 touchdowns, and he played a great game. But there were chinks in his armor, just like there were chinks in Beck's armor. But I think that if Georgia plays a clean game, they can beat Alabama. But the problem is, this is not the old SEC format. And because it's not the old SEC format, a lot of people are predicting that they're going to play again. I don't think so. I think they're not going to see each other again. But I think Georgia, if they played in a different setting, even if they went back to Tuscaloosa, it wouldn't even matter. I think Georgia's a better football team. Because if you can have Carson Beck play that bad and still bring him back and almost win the game, Milroe, I don't think he's going to be as sharp as he was for most of that game. But if you see the comparison here, very close. But the big thing is people are talking about Shedeur Sanders. I don't want to get off that. So let me go to the comparison of Shedeur and Carson Beck. Now, Shedeur had a great game yesterday against UCF. So as you look at the stats that he had yesterday, you will see that, if I can get it to work. I can't get it to scroll up. But he had a decent game yesterday. I don't know what the problem is. I had it where it was scrolling up. All right. Okay. I can't get it to scroll up. But he had a clean game. He still was being chased around the pocket a little bit, but he made some great throws under duress. And overall, Colorado, like I said, played a complete game. But they're making it seem like because Beck had a bad game and Shedeur had a great game, that all of a sudden he's catapulted to the top of the list. Now, I'm completely objective here. So I am going to go and show you some stats from last year where Shedeur, where he played against Oregon and he played against Washington State. In those games, he was beat up and harassed and chased and everything else. Nobody said his draft stock was going to drop because he had a bad game or his team got beat up. You see that game against Oregon, he got beat 42-6. He went 23 of 33 for 159 yards. Far different from the way he played yesterday. And Bo Nix, who's doing well with the Broncos right now, he's got 276 yards and 3 touchdowns and an interception. So I think depending on the competition you're playing, it's going to go how your stats will be. So you can't say that Beck is now not a top draft choice because he had a bad game in spots against Alabama. But who was he playing? He was playing against Alabama. If you're Beck, you would rather play UCF than play against Alabama any day. So I'm just saying Sanders is doing a good job, but I'm not taking anything away from Beck because Beck played a much stiffer competition. And when Sanders plays a stiffer competition, he hadn't showed those 400 yards. I hadn't seen it yet. So you can see right here, he had 159 against Oregon. I got one of them to show you. He also played against Washington State last year. And Washington State is one of those deceptive programs. And you get them wrong, they can show you a few things. And when they played last year, they beat Colorado 46-14. And as you can see right here, Sanders only had 86 yards on 6 of 10 passing. He got beat up that night. He got beat up against Oregon, and he got beat up by a couple of other teams. So to say that all of a sudden, because he had this great game on the same day that Beck struggles, you can't say that, automatically that makes him a higher draft choice. What we would like to see is Sanders behind the same kind of team that Beck has, and then we can see a apples to apples comparison to see who's the best quarterback. Now, you won't get that until we get to maybe the Senior Bowl or when they actually get into NFL camps. But again, I'm not saying who's a better quarterback. I'm just saying that I never met a quarterback who could throw on his back. So whether it's Beck or Sanders or anybody that came before him, if you playing against a tough defense and they putting pressure on you, just like Baltimore put some heat on Josh Allen tonight. Anytime you get to a quarterback and you can make him throw in a bad situation, you got the advantage on him. And I think that, it was an unfair comparison for Beck to be downgraded like he was based on one performance. And out of that performance, he didn't play that bad. So in my opinion, I think that Georgia, probably the better team over Alabama this year. Unfortunately, they lost last night, and I don't think they're going to get a chance to play them again unless, of course, they both play their way into like the semifinals. I don't think either one of them is going to be in the SEC championship game, but maybe one of them will be, maybe Alabama. But I think that Texas is going to win the SEC, so that's going to nullify that. That's going to nullify that rematch. So look out for Texas to win the SEC, in my opinion. So I just want to come on real quick and recap what I talked about. we give Colorado the credit for finally putting together a complete football game, and they've showed you the potential that they have. Warren Sapp's defensive line put some pressure on the quarterback. If they can continue to do that, then they can make some noise in the Big 12. They don't have a game this week, but they do have a game in 2 weeks against Kansas State. And right now, Kansas State is playing some real good football. If they can shut them down the way they did UCF, then I'm announcing the arrival of Colorado. But until they can do that on a consistent basis, I don't see it happening. But that was a real good performance they had in Orlando yesterday. And Georgia and Alabama, another great game. I think with all the mistakes that Georgia made, I think if they play a clean game, they'll beat Alabama. And like I say, Milroe, he looks like the same Milroe to me in the second half, but he did come out with that long bomb there at the end of the game, and that was huge. But that was more of the kid making a play than Milroe. All he did was get it out there in a way that the kid can go adjust and make a play, and that's what he did. But it was not on time at all. The kid just made a good adjustment. So again, Milroe, he's improved. He started out well, but I just don't see him taking Alabama to the national championship. But no matter who wins the national championship, it's going to come down to one thing: who stays healthy. So what you want now is a team with a light schedule who can stay healthy and can be a threat when you get to the playoffs. Because if you make it to the playoffs when you're healthy and say Alabama keep playing these games against Georgia and Texas and everybody else they got to play, they may come into the playoffs beat up. Texas quarterback is already hurt. They may be beat up. So, a team like Utah or, maybe a Colorado who can stay healthy, go on a run, that's all it takes. That's what happens in the NFL every year. Best team don't always win. Same thing with college basketball. Best team rarely wins. It's who's the healthiest. And I think that is the case. And the last point I made was the comparison between Shedeur and Carson Beck. Beck looked horrible in spots, but when it came time to win, he put his team in position to win. Adding to that, they said that because of his performance, it showed up where some deficiencies where it's going to hurt him come NFL time. And when you compare that to the way Shedeur played yesterday against UCF, they're saying that now you see the difference. Well, I beg to differ about that because Shedeur didn't play against Alabama. UCF didn't put the same kind of heat on him as Alabama would. But when you saw teams that did put heat on Shedeur, he didn't have the same great numbers. So I don't see how you can compare one performance and all of a sudden say he's so much better than the next guy when you're not comparing apples to oranges, apples to apples. So that's my thought about that. But the Ravens, they whipped the Bills tonight. Regular season Ravens, I call them, keep an eye on them. They're going to win a lot of games. But there's that defensive coordinator sitting there watching that say, okay, that's what you want to do, huh? Make an adjustment here, make an adjustment there, and come playoff time, the Ravens are going to fall. Remember, I told you that first. This is Sports for Real.